Well, good morning or day or evening, night, depending on whether you're coming in live or watching this later, and whatever time of day it is for you, whichever time zone you're in. And I know our time zones are going to be changing in North America this coming week. I think in most of North America, at least most of the US, maybe Canada. I'm not entirely sure on time zone changes. And I know that UK, Europe goes at a different time. So just be on alert for that in the next few weeks, if our time zones align as they are right now or differently. Impermanence. Okay, so I have already started the live stream and I will Namo Tassa and do a screen share. I think this is our third week on perceptions, and hopefully we'll have one more before I head back into retreat myself and Ayya Niyyānika comes out. So, Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Dang tamang sangam namasami. So welcome everyone from whatever time zone you're in now, live or watching this later. I will share the screen because today we are going to look at our inversions, our perversions, our distortions. Okay. And the sutta that we are going to base this exploration on is called the Vipallasa Sutta. And I wanted to jump to the goal of why why look at our perversions, because we want to decondition our habitual responses to sense objects. Now we've had lifetimes of conditioning. We've had definitely, just even if you look at the last year of your life, you'll see the different things that have directed you, the conditions, what are the things that are, projecting you into your thinking, into your responding, into the views that you're holding. And depending on where you are in the world, the most salient political thing, or one that's global, or one that's personal in your family, or just in your own home with your own dog, all of this will condition us. And we also respond to those things that emerge from our conditioning. So all of these sense objects, which include the people that we are relating to, the systems, the social structures, the neighborhood, the job, the volunteering, the lack of resources or the abundance of resources, all of these coming on us, we will have a response to them. And what we want to do is decondition our habits, the things that tend to be baked into having a human existence. So we're going to look at that. First, we'll look a little bit at the word Vipallasa, trying to bring in a little bit of Pali study and a little bit of, how do these words come about, so that as we continue in our practice, we can kind of have that Pali word, which is, when we give it its essential Dhammic meaning, can sometimes be better than using a translation into our native language. The native language informs our heart in a particular way. Having a new word sometimes helps us to give nuances to words that we may not have habitually understood them to mean. So here's our vocab for the day, the Vipallasa. And looking at the Digital Poly Dictionary, this can mean distortion, delusion, hallucination, inversion, perversion. It's literally a throwing completely upside down. So we're looking at the world topsy-turvy. We're believing in base notions that aren't in fact the nature of reality. It's I do like a distortion. I also like I think it comes further down uh, a derangement. We're kind of a little bit crazy until we're fully arahants. So the root of this word is pari as, and the root as, and the V negates. V or ni, it's a negation. Pari is around, and this root as is throw. So literally, it's throw around to be upside down. So I feel like we're in this wrestling match with reality and continually getting dropped on our head. There's a nice resource within this digital poly dictionary where you can see how the word gets, because this is Vipal, P-A-L, La, L-A, long A. It doesn't look like how is it going to get to pari. So I like that this tool gives us how that the morphology of a word when it becomes combined and made into a word based out of parts. So it's the V, the negation, pari, around, and the pari kind of it morphs. There's a technical term for what this is, um, to make it sound different or to just the evolution of going from Sanskrit to Pali, going as Pali is made to combine words, so it goes from Pari to Pali to Pali to Pal. So that's kind of the evolution of that particular syllable, and then the root. Um, the root becomes as, and then the ending on it. So Vipallasa is the end result. So if you want to go into further detail with someone who's teaching Pali or Sanskrit, they can tell you more the technical details of what's happening here. But this is very useful for me because sometimes I try to break the word down myself. And if I just put in P-A-L-L or P-A-L, I'm not getting the same results. And so I need to understand that it could be an evolution from a different root syllable. So it doesn't throw me around so much. So the Pali English Dictionary says a reversal change, especially in a bad sense, inversion, perversion, derangement, corruption, and distortion. So it's like we're looking into this mountain lake pool, and if it didn't have that slime growing on the top, we would be able to see this crystal clear all the way down to the bottom of that pool. But a lot of times we have this slime or growth that's obscuring it. So we're not actually able to see into the pool clearly. And that's kind of what I would think a Vipallasa view would be. So I will say that today I am also a little externally distorted. We have a leak in the apartment, and so they had to break a hole in the wall, and it's getting dried out, but it's releasing mold spores. So I'm a little bit boggled. This is just, the reality working with, and so I'm trying not to like grab onto this when impacted by mold, I'm not functional and just, you know, not have a second arrow. So if I'm a little bit slow or off, causes and conditions. Here we are. It is impermanent. So we'll read through the sutta. First reading is from Thanissaro Bhikkhu, Where you can find this in the canon is in the Anguttara Nikaya 4.49. So 49 in the fours. Vipallasa Sutta. Monks, there are these four perversions of perception, perversions of mind, perversions of view. So perception, mind, and view. And I'm not fond of mind, citta, heart, mind, thought. Which four? Constant, with regard to the inconstant, is a perversion of perception, a perversion of mind, a perversion of view. Pleasant, with regard to the stressful. Self, with regard to not self. Attractive, with regard to the unattractive, is a perversion of perception, a perversion of mind, a perversion of view. These are the four perversions of perception, perversions of mind, perversions of view. And then the opposite. There are these four non-perversions of perception, non-perversions of mind, non-perversions of view. Which four? Inconstant with regard to the inconstant with regard to the inconstant. Yes, it's matched up. Is a non-perversion of perception, a non-perversion of mind, a non-perversion of view. Stressful with regard to the stressful, not self with regard to not self, and unattractive with regard to the unattractive. Is a non-perversion of perception, a non-perversion of mind, a non-perversion of view. These are the four non-perversions of perception, non-perversions of mind, non-perversions of view. And then this has a kind of a poem form of it. Perceiving constancy in the inconstant, pleasure in the stressful, self in what's not self, attractiveness in the unattractive. Beings destroyed by wrong view go mad out of their minds, deranged, bound to Mara's yoke. From the yoke they find no rest. Beings go on to the wandering on, leading to birth and death. But when awakened ones arise in the world, bringing light to the world, they proclaim the Dhamma, leading to the stilling of stress. When those with discernment listen, they regain their senses, seeing the inconstant as inconstant, the stressful as stressful, what's not self as not self, the unattractive as unattractive. Undertaking right view, they just transcend all stress and suffering. So there is a real turn in this poem that just lifts my heart of this regaining our senses. That we go from going mad out of our minds to regaining our senses. And I imagine that well, I suppose maybe there's artificial intelligence now, but I imagine those, at least on the live call, are human like I am. And that, yeah, I'm getting some agreement out there. And yeah, if we take a look at it, there are these times where we're mad. And I don't mean angry, I mean like Mad Hatter kind of off our rockers, with the distortions as we meet the sense world. I recall several incidents in my life where, like, looking at it, even in the midst of the experience, there was enough mindfulness to know the mad train has left the station, you know, and off I go. And I'm like, why? Why? You know, can I stop this train? And the momentum of the train is already, you know, off in its diluted rail. So having that sense of what does that feel like? How is it impacting? How am I relating in the world when I'm out of my mind? and finding it doesn't feel good, it's not wholesome, and the residue of it is unhelpful. After such an experience, I feel very drained. There might be this burst of energetic emotion of whatever type during the encounter, but afterwards I'm depleted, I'm shaky, I'm stressed, and I'm not in a balanced, even stressless, peaceful manner. There's definitely no stillness. I'm agitated. And it takes a while for this wound up agitation to dissipate. And in our coping strategies of society, that usually means we either mask it or we stir it up again. And so we live in some sort of form of putting the slime over to not look at what has happened or is happening, or we just, so that's the kind of looking the other way, or we stir it up because, we're like, this is right, I am right. This needs attention. How could they? It's all messed up. And so the sensations I'm carrying are that of agitation and stress. I'm constricted, I'm tight, and I'm definitely dissipating the energies that I have. So in this, we have, where is that? But when the awakened ones arise in the world, so ours is the Gautama Buddha, bringing light to the world, and they proclaim the Dhamma, which we're reading now, leading to the stilling of stress. So this is what our practice and where we begin to look at the Vipallasa and how to right our views, how to turn up. A lot of times you'll see at the end of suttas where someone says, "You've turned upright what was overturned." So this is what our practice does. And although when I was looking at this sutta, I thought, well, this is the ultimate cognitive behavioral therapy. It's really not cognitive. What it is it's clearing away the obfuscations of cognition. So it's allowing for a stilling. Now, Ajahn Brahm talks about you've got the mind, but and he uses that deep lake analogy. You've got the mind, the citta, and it's pure, it's radiant. And then even if you can kind of get the hindrances, all the water analogies of get that cleared away and you look in and you start to go into a nice meditation, then you look in and you see the little fishies swimming around, and the little fishies are, vitaka vichara, the applied and sustained attention, your piti, your sukha, your bliss, your happiness, ekagata, the one-pointedness. Those are still not the mind. Those are the fish swimming around in it. And so those are kind of like, helping, maybe they're the little plankton eaters that help to take the analogy a little further, help us clear out that mind. But eventually, even the fish go and subside, and you're just left with this stress-free, peaceful, clear, bright, very bright, resilient, stable state. And that way then coming out of that and back into our interactive world, what we're coming with is not the agitation I was talking about earlier, but a stability and clarity and stillness, so that we are looking at things in reality, that things are impermanent. They're stressful in the nature of them. This is not me, it's not mine, it's not myself. And the ultimate aspects of it aren't attractive in the sense of this is something that is going to just please me for the rest of eternity. So undertaking this, they transcend all stress and suffering. So this is why we want to put the bar this high, why we want to not stay in the delusions. and to break clear and see clearly. And this is why it's really important for us to not just study the suttas, but spend time in meditation, clearing the mind to whatever extent we're able to in our lives today. So we'll go back now to some more of the Pali and the exact teachings from this sutta. So breaking it down, there are three things that are distorted, and there are four types of distortions described in this particular sutta. So in another sheet I'm not going to share it today. It's a grid of 12 cells that each one has its way of distortion and clarifying. And some other week we could look at that more deeply. Just want to get through the basics of how to work with it this week. So the four distortions are perception, which is our sanya, heart, mind, our citta, and our view, ditti. And sanya is the way that we perceive things, the way that we see things. I talked before about kind of our filing cabinet of associations that on eye contact, there's eye consciousness, and the eye consciousness brings up, so I'm looking in that direction and I see a painting of Mahapajapati, and I have this, kind of there is this, it looks like that, it's drawn like an icon, but when I then go into it came from a Lokavahara, it was drawn by such and such an artist, then I'm getting off into more proliferating about it. But there is that initial, I perceive it, it's pleasant. It's got a basic tonality to me. It's a relationship. Just that initial contact and what comes up is the sanya part of it. So that can be distorted. Let's see. Maybe I have a history where that particular style of painting, iconography, is jarring to me because of some experience I had as a child. So I could look at that and the Vedana associated with it could be unpleasant. It could, begin to percolate up memories or just physical responses to. And so the perceiving would be different. You know, so the tonality of the perception is not unconditioned. It's always conditioned. Chitta, the next thing that's distortion bound, capable of having distortions, it's our heart mind, the way that we think, the way that we intend. These are conditioned as well, and that conditioning can be distorted. I got a question this last week about this. We might get into more about, are the Brahma Viharas the pure form of this? And I'd say yes, maybe, but the Brahma Viharas are definitely a tool for helping us to align and right our view. Now, you can pick up the Brahma Viharas, I can, in a diluted way as well. We've got that phrase of rose-colored glasses, where it's a distortion. Oh, it's all hunky-dory, it's kind of let me just get my crystals out. I'm going to purify. I'm not putting down crystals or those types of things. I think they can be tools, but if I can clear everything in the world with a delusional pushing away. If you look at the tonality of when you're going into that kind of attitude, if you see any kind of pushing or closing in your body mind state, you're really not picking up those Brahma Viharas in the radiant clear mind. You're perhaps using them as a tool, but you really need to look at the intentionality behind it. You really need to assess down to, am I purifying my mind here? Or am I just painting with, Technicolor, at its worst, drug hazed. And I'm not talking about healthy rebalancing drugs, but ones that I'm intentionally using to get out of reality. If I'm painting with those types of lenses, then I'm putting a distortion, a perversion over the citta. And this can lead to view, DT, which is uh, view is a good translation, but it's also kind of our philosophy, our attitude, our credo, our beliefs, opinions. And so when they get calcified into this is the view for this nation or this approach to this crisis or this, and there's not a sense of maybe, a sense of it might be, a sense of um, exploratory curiosity. When we're in a fixed view, then it's not probably going to be a pure view. So look at the rigidity. And again, I look at my body and see when I'm holding this view, am I soft, open, warm-hearted? Or when I hold this view, do I begin to crinkle in the brow? Do I tighten in my jaw? Does my stomach churn? Do I get, you know, like my muscles are all tight and ready to go into a boxing ring? It can really be a body-based sense of, is my view tight and distorted? And that's a way that I'm able to look at myself and say, all right, I'm holding tightly. The Buddha does not advocate for tight, fixed views. There's a fluidity of experience. So what are the distortions that can land in this? I also want to say that the Sanya, Citta, Diti, they inform each other. So my perceptions will inform my thoughts, my intentions, the qualities of my heart mind. The that will inform the view that I hold, the holding of a view. The view that I have will inform my perceptions, on and on and on. So I actually, they often draw it as a cycle, but I actually feel like it's, a tetrahedron that's, I said, no, it wouldn't be three. It would be only two-dimensional, but you get the idea. When we go into the distortions, we can get into multiple dimensions here. And the distortions are impermanent as permanent, anicca. These are terms I'm sure you've heard before. Suffering, dukkha, not self, anatta, and ugliness is how it's translated in this one. The asubha, the asubha practice. And we'll look at a couple of other suttas that define that more clearly, what it is when we're looking at our perceptions of these. What are we looking at? Okay, so the first sutta to look at has three of these. It has all four, but it directly has three of them. I'm going to actually tell me, someone with a nod or a thumbs up, did the screen change to the Girimananda Sutta? It did. Excellent. Great. So in the Girimananda Sutta, there are 10 perceptions. This is a great sutta we can go through over many weeks at some point. And within it, it starts with the impermanence, not self, ugliness. So three of the four. And then it goes into drawbacks, and down here, dissatisfaction with the world. So it has the dukkha kind of in it, but not as a direct perception look. So we'll look at the impermanence, not self, and ugliness, and then we'll go to the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta for the definition of dukkha. So I'll go back to this one. So in the Girimananda Sutta, it asks, what is the perception of impermanence? So it's when you go to do meditation, you go to the wilderness, root of a tree, empty hut, and you reflect. So it's saying you take a time out, you take a settling down, so that you clear the mind enough to begin to really look at the nature of things. Eventually, we'll do this out in the days. And I know of people who've had that insight moment out in the world where they see something falling from a tree, or and so the actual, or if you look at the Enlightenment poems, um, is as they pour the water and the water runs down the hill, this kind of thing where they begin to see this thing. But there's a clarity of mind that's come from the stilling practices of meditation. And this is how they reflect: form, feeling, perception, choices, and consciousness are impermanent. And so they meditate, observing impermanence in the five grasping aggregates. So when we want to look at impermanence and see it, where we look is at the khandhas. We look at perception itself. And I think you can see the changing nature of perception if you consider the foods that you liked when you were 3, and you consider the foods that you liked now, or you have liked, or even, things have changed. I entered monastic life with a few foods that I just did not like, but I wasn't allergic to them. I have some foods that I'm allergic to. I still avoid those as much as I can. Um, but just ones I didn't like. I didn't like the texture of it or the taste of it, or, whatever. It squeaks when you bite into it, whatever. I'm not talking about an animal, please. My mind just went, what? But, just that texture that goes against your teeth. And so I disliked these few food items. Now, because I don't have a lot of choice about what ends up offered. And so I just would take it and say, okay, I'm just going to practice with it. It's not going to hurt me to eat this. I just don't like it. And over time, as I just continued to eat it, it changed. And some of those foods now, it's like, oh, wow, that healthy whatever is here. I'm happy to put that in my bowl. And so my perception of that particular food being a texture and a squeakiness and a taste that was unpleasant became one that was, oh, that is A, good for me, and B, I actually like the taste of it now. So this is one that most of us can see how our tastes, or your tastes in music, or your tastes in scenery, or the activities you want to do in the evening when you have a day off, or some time and space, who you want to hang out with. These things are impermanent. So we can look at it in that gross way, and then more and more subtly we get to see how things shift and change. Let's see, that's impermanence. I've lost my play. What is the perception of not self? It's when you go again to meditation and you reflect. So you come out of your meditation and you reflect. The eye and sights, the ear and sounds, the nose and smells, the tongue and tastes, body and touches, and mind and ideas are not self. And so they meditate observing not self in the 6 interior and exterior sense fields. And again, we can do this right in our awareness practice with the senses. Um, you know, what I'm pulled to, is that me being pulled to look at something as I pull, oops, oh, it's Zoom raising my hand. I have a question. It doesn't matter, yes. So it's not me raising my hand, it's Zoom raising its hand. No self there. Just to create an example out of that. And again, the touches and even the ideas and thoughts. I notice that depending on the stimulation I've had throughout the day, or like being a little boggled by the mold in the wall, are the thoughts that I'm having me and mine, or is it the mold? And this is something that we actually, someone where I used to live, there was a chronic condition. We were always chasing the mold in the kitchen to eradicate it. But the signs for when it would arise, I think I was in Anagarika, and I went to, it was Ayasobana at that point, and I said, I don't know what's going on. I feel so anxious, but I can't track what I'm anxious about. There doesn't seem to be, I've had anxiety numbers of times in my life to extreme extents, but I have the sensations of anxiety and I don't know why. And Ayasobana, who'd lived at the Hermitage for many years, said, "Oh, let's go look in the kitchen." And I'm like, "What?" We go to the kitchen. She starts opening up cupboards and sniffing around. And then she gets down to the pot cupboard and she says, "I found it." And the inside wall of that cupboard had black mold in it. And I hadn't any notion at that time that that could be a causal conditioning for that kind of ideation to arise in my mind. And she explained that it can impact people in different ways. Some are anger driven, some are anxious driven, and some are paranoid driven. I don't know what the studies were behind that, but she was citing something. And by my predilection was the anxiety bound type. But is that my predilection or my condas? It's my conditioning, and someone else's conditioning could bring other sensations, thoughts um, to bear based on those conditions. So this is a way that we can look at not self. And when we've got the mindfulness to have the antidotes, oh yeah, how seriously can I take this thought I'm having? Oh, it helps us to break down our fixed views that we may have created in our more recent past. Okay, I'm going to keep going for time here. Each one of these we could spend a week on at least for a lifetime. Okay, so that was called the perception of not self. What is the perception of ugliness? This is the asubha. It's when you examine your body from the soles of the feet up and down, and you see it as wrapped in skin and full of many kinds of, here it says filth. I think in the chant books most of you have seen, it says unattractive things. And then it goes through the 31 parts of the body. And from the hair on the head and the body, the nails, the teeth, the skin, the flesh, the sinews, bones, bone marrow, kidneys, heart, liver, diaphragm, spleen, lungs, intestines, mesentery, undigested food, feces, bile, phlegm, pus, blood, sweat, fat, tears, grease, saliva, snot, and synovial fluid and urine. Excuse me. Some of that phlegm. And so they meditate, observing the ugliness of this body. And this is a perception of ugliness. And there are other external ways to also look at this factor of asubha, but you're walking around with a bag of unattractive things with you when you go to your cushion or when you're out in the world, so it's right there. And definitely, if you've ever had an infection in any of these and the pus comes up, or the smell of it, or the smell of sweat. Now, some people find that pleasant, some people don't. That right there, there's a perception. But about, is it attractive? Does it feel like there's something good and healthy and lasting? And if you want to have a heart or a liver, but do you want to like snuggle with it? Is it attractive? Eh, I'd be hard pressed to want to give my teddy bear up for spleen, um, to be the thing that I prop my arms around at night. So we can start to look at these things. Here, if we've got some food that's left over, or You cut parts of, you take the banana peel off, you don't eat that part. And we put it in the compost bin. Well, this last week I went a little bit long before I took the compost out. And then when I went to the compost thing and I pulled the lid off, oh my goodness, that pleasant fruit and food that was there, was put in a week ago is highly unpleasant now. So I got to look at both impermanence and the unpleasant, the asubha nature of these things. And a lot of the unpleasantness does come from the impermanence itself. So this is something that we can really look at and investigate. Okay, whipping right through again. We're going to go back to the dukkha and the definition that's kind of the most commonly seen comes from the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. So this is where we get to go through the Four Noble Truths. And the first one about what is dukkha. This is the response. Birth is dukkha, aging is dukkha, illness is dukkha, death is dukkha. Union with what is displeasing is dukkha. Separation from what is pleasing is dukkha. Not to get what one wants is dukkha. In brief, the five aggregates subject to clinging are dukkha. So we looked at the five aggregates earlier in the sense of in the sense of impermanence. And here we're looking at it when you are clinging, there is dukkha. And this is where the three characteristics of anicca, anatta, dukkha, really they're like lenses into the prism of our prison. The dukkha aspect here is that we're clinging, we're attaching to something that is not going to give us lasting pleasant experience. And you see that from the birthing to the aging to the illness, the dying. And you see that in regards to, if I just held on to that pleasant piece of fruit, it wasn't gonna last. If I'd left the remains of the banana on the counter, it was not going to be pleasant. So these are the ways that we can start to look at dukkha in a kind of simple way, and it can get to be more and more subtle. Okay, I think for time, I'm gonna just read through the sutta in another version, and then we can open it up. I see I've already got my hand raised. I wonder if there's a way to lower it. If not, it's just me high-fiving you all the time. Okay. So we'll read through the Vipallasa Sutta, Bhikkhu Sujato's, Venerable Bhikkhu Sujato's translation. Mendicants, there are these four perversions of perception, mind, and view. What for? Taking impermanence as permanence, taking suffering as happiness, taking not self as self, taking ugliness as beauty. These are the four perversions of perception, mind, and view. There are these four corrections of perception, mind, and view. What for? Taking impermanence as impermanence, taking suffering as suffering, taking not self as not self, taking ugliness as ugliness. These are the four corrections of perception, mind, and view. Perceiving impermanence as permanence, suffering as happiness, not self as self, and ugliness as beauty, sentient beings are ruined by wrong view, deranged, out of their minds. Yoked by Mara's yoke, these people find no sanctuary from the yoke. Sentient beings continue to transmigrate with ongoing birth and death. But when the Buddhas arise in the world, those beacons reveal this teaching that leads to the stilling of suffering. When a wise person hears them, they get their mind back, seeing impermanence as impermanence, suffering as suffering, not self as not self, and ugliness as ugliness. Taking up right view, they've risen above all suffering. Sadhu. So this is today's exploration of the Vipallasas. Um, Mostly, yeah, I think I want to just give one example. Um, if I do the embodiment work this summer with the suttas, we'll actually do the experiment. So I'm just going to describe it now. So I had a teacher who would say, just kind of just watch him walk. And, he would walk back and forth in the room. And it's like, okay, do you notice any emotional tone to his walking? And it's like, nah, most of us, not so much really. And he's like, okay, so now bring up something that you're kind of irritated about or angry or, bring up something, just bring it to mind. And he said, okay, so now, then he repeats the walking and he says, so what does my walking look like now? And pretty much all of us are like, yeah, you kind of looked a little angry yourself. Um, and he would then say, to the best of his ability and knowledge, he did not change the way he walked at all. It was the lens in which we were looking through it. And so that was true for me. I had attended many of his sessions, and so I came across this exercise many times. And the first two times I did that, and both times it's like, yeah, I perceived the second time he was walking angry. So the third and fourth time that I saw him do it, I intentionally didn't play along. I just observed him, like I'm just watching a movie reel of two clips. Are they the same clip or different? And when I watched him with the same neutrality in me, I did not see a change in his body. So it wasn't like he was inadvertently projecting anger in the second time. Um, it was that he was walking in a neutral way both times, but the lens at which we were looking through was different. So this is the bottom line for this one to me is, don't believe your habitual responses. Decondition them. Don't don't believe your perceptions and don't believe that you can see somebody else's perceptions. It is a rabbit hole ripe for disaster. So, happy to open it up for questions or comments. Let's have questions and comments directly to the sutta while we're in the recording, and then I'm happy to stop the recording and open it up for either more general or more personal sharing if you would like things that are not recorded. So apparently you can just raise your physical hand and Zoom might catch it, or you can do it mechanically. Joseph.
Thank you, Venerable. I'm considering the part about Asubha and Subha, the translation of ugliness. I have one teacher who says that he prefers the translation non-beautiful. So seeing what's beautiful as just non-beautiful, more of a neutral,
Mhm.
because I feel like with ugliness it can lead into aversion. And
Yeah.
so I was thinking about that, and because also just to note that it's said in some other teachings that the culmination of metta leads to the beautiful. And so I was wondering how that relates, if that's appropriate or in line with the sutta's teaching.
I'm not going to answer that last one because I would have to go to the sutta itself to see whether it is using the word suba or kalyana or something else. You
Okay.
know, so it may or may not be the same concept, which is why it's helpful for us to start to bring some of the Pali into our experience of the suttas, because then we'll be able to see when are we talking about synonyms and when are the concepts slightly different. But on that, about the beautiful or the ugly, another translation I saw was using pure and impure, and those words I felt were helpful in a way of like looking at that clarity of the mind and the clear pool, the purity of the water I'm drinking type of thing. But it also has its own social connotations about purity that can get a little messy. So that's why when we translate it into English or any other native language that we may be speaking, the words will resonate a little bit differently. So if the word ugly is or unattractive is bringing up aversion, definitely pick a different one because that's not the intended thing. There should be a dispassion, but not an aversion. It's not a pushing away. Otherwise,
Otherwise,
right into dukkha. So then we're going to enter a different one of the inversions or distortions of mind. If we pick the word that's bringing up a quality of us being aversive.
may I ask a follow-up to that? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Would it so this it's more about if we look at the Pali, there's Sukhanti and Subanti, and so understanding what the B part and the K means to differentiate Subha and Sukha, maybe would that be more helpful for helping us understand these perceptions?
We could do that another time of getting into the digital. I don't know if you've seen this reference, the digital poly dictionary. Earlier on, I think you may not have been there yet. What you can do is open up the section on grammar and see the construction of those two words. I think they have different roots. So they're not I know they have different roots. Um, if you look at the roots of those, you might be able to see how closely associated are they conceptually. That would be an interesting exercise for us to do on another day. Thank you. John with an H.
Yeah, thank you. I was wondering, could you repeat that phrase you used earlier, where the perceptions, it's like seeing the world upside down, all turned around, or something that was really funny. It's a
Mm-mm.
good way to remember things.
Absolutely. So throwing completely upside down. So this is one of the definitions of Vipallasa, and it's when we break the word apart. So this is the literal translation of it. And the Buddha, when he would give a discourse, somebody at the end of the discourse would say, "Oh, it's as if you have righted something that was upside down." And that's the Dhamma. Ajahn Brahm made a really nice point around, people at the time of the Buddha were getting enlightened just listening to the suttas, as the Buddha would speak them. So, hey, we just did a sutta today. How many of us got it? And the problem is that those who were listening at that time were in that purity of mind, the clarity, the hindrances were at bay when they were listening. And with the hindrances at bay, with these distortions not present, they were hearing the words of the Buddha exactly as they were being spoken as Dhamma. Our perceptions, our overlays are why we get maybe some uplift of the heart, we get a sense of direction we can follow, but it's not the full penetration of reality. And so this is why having that throwing completely upside down and then having it righted, we have to go through the steps and the practices of clarifying and purifying the heart, mind, the citta. Oh, thank you for the question. All right. Any others, or shall I? I'm going to stop the share first, and then, yeah, there we go. Lower my head. Shall we close this part and then open up for discussion after it's not preserved? Oh, Adrian, you got one before we go. Excellent. Go for it.
Yeah, I was kind of unsure whether to ask because I don't know if it's like formulated clearly, but just thinking about the misperception or the vipallasa of suffering or seeing what suffering as suffering,
Mhm.
is that I was just thinking like the kind of impermanence, non-self and suffering aspect of things like, but if someone is fully liberated, then non-self and the impermanence still relate, but they're not suffering, right? So
Well,
when you see the suffering as suffering, is it that you see it, but you're not bound up with it or something? I don't.
you're not bound up with it. So when we looked at the dukkha one, it said with the clinging of the aggregates.
Mm,
And so an arahant still has dukkha dukkha. So dukkha is broken up into like four types. And dukkha dukkha is the easiest one to remember. Dukkha dukkha is essentially like I've got a stomach ache, my back hurts.
mm,
Um, the physical conditions that we have when Devadatta, threw a stone and a chip hit the back of the Buddha's ankle, it still hurt. It was dukkha. No, but he didn't then say, and it drained him, you know, but it wasn't a clinging. It shouldn't be like this. There was no dukkha overlay on the dukkha of having a chip cut his heel. But he did say, I got to go rest now. So there is a toll when dukkha is present. If you're starving, you're still starving, because that's what the body has a necessity for that nutriment. And if it's not getting in, or if it's hurt, it will still be hurt. So the arahant still experiences dukkha, but they do not experience the clinging aggregates, which is that second arrow overlay. So yeah.
thank you. Yeah, that was really clear. Thank you.
All right, so we'll just bow to the Buddha Dhamma Sangha if you wish, and then I'll turn the recording part off. To the Buddha, pay homage. To the Dhamma, we pay homage. And to the Sangha, we pay homage. Adieu.